Okay. Today we're going to talk about a couple things. First of all, how to submit your capstone, just because we moved to Canvas just for the capstone, and the submission process is a little bit different. I'm also going to talk really quickly through what to expect for graduation, like what the graduation process looks like. And then I'll talk about like an overview of data science interviews. So to start, let's talk about submission. So there's going to be quite a few things that you're going to have to submit. There's two places where you have to submit your project, and then your blogs are all here, as you can see. I talked about this briefly after the recording last time, but just to go over it again. For your capstone project, you have to submit things at both of these links. I'll start with the easier one first. You submit your URL here. So you just click into the GitHub repository URL assignment, start it, and just copy and paste your GitHub URL. And then submit assignment. If you want me to double check whether your submission is in, just let me know. Happy to do that. So that is that. And then the one that's slightly more complicated is for this other link. So this other link of the capstone project, there are actually instructions on how to submit, but I don't need you all to go through all of that. So just for some background, other instructors, other students, when you submit an assignment, they actually want you to PDF every single notebook that you have, just so you can scroll through and like annotate. I don't really annotate your code, but I will be looking at and nitpicking at your code for these capstones, but I don't need to annotate it on PDF. So therefore, for this, because the submission type is PDF, just submit some PDF of your work. Most of my students from like my other cohort, they just submit a PDF of their slides, because I think that's the easiest thing. You probably already have it as a PDF file. So in here, you scroll down, choose a file, and then upload just, the PDF of like your presentation or something else.
I think you're still in the GitHub URL. At least that's what I see.
My screen share was.
Yeah, I can see that.
Sorry about that. Let me just show you where this was. So this is the capstone project here. Start assignment, choose file, and it will be a PDF that you upload, and then you just click submit. So for the project, it's just these two things that you got to submit. Questions? I mean, of course, please Slack me if you're like can't figure out where to submit these things as well. But any questions about this?
This is to be submitted before Sunday?
So it doesn't actually have to be submitted by Sunday. This platform's a little bit better with like this platform works better with my flexibility of due date. So my due date for you all is just the day before you want to have your capstone review. And I'll talk about scheduling your capstone review as well in a little bit, but just the day before you want to have your capstone review, you have to submit your project, because I'll pretty much only look at it the day before, because I have like all of your projects to look through. So yes, whenever you schedule your capstone review and in like one-on-ones this weekend, maybe early next week, or Slack me as well if you want to like discuss timings, because I do have limited timings next week. Week after, I'm back to normal time. So just letting you all know, if you're like looking for time slots and you can't find anything, we can talk about it. So that's submitting your capstone.
Weekend also you're working?
Say that again?
This weekend also you're working?
This weekend, yes, I have some time slots on Sunday.
Oh, okay.
Awesome. And next weekend, I'm pretty much on a plane the entire time, so unfortunately cannot be working. Okay, so this is the capstone project. Your blogs as well. So for each blog, and remember we have to do 7 blog posts to graduate, just under each one, go in and submit your URL to your blog post. So you just click into here, start assignment, you can paste your URL. And then just do that for each blog post. Even if you'd like submitted it on Learn before, it's really just for, it's not really like you would get audited or anything, but just for like system consistency, if you could just put all your blog links there for me. Any questions about blogs? I know 7 is a lot, and I think most of you are around like 3 or 4 blogs, so you have a few more. Okay, so let me go into, I know in the capstone guidelines, I have a little bit on like graduation expectations. Okay. So before I talk about interviews, these are the graduation expectations. So the deliverables. I haven't changed these dates yet, sorry. So presentations will be May 3rd. Okay. So the deliverables, you have your capstone project that I just showed you. For blogs, you actually need 7, each submitted on blog submission links, and then your presentations are May 3rd. So those are what you have to submit. Everything has to be submitted by May 14th. If you have a special circumstance where you're unable to submit by May 14th, you have to let me know. There's some of you who I've already talked to about this. If you cannot get everything done by May 14th, please let me know, because you might be automatically transferred into the next cohort, and we don't want that to happen. You would have to like redo, like wait another 8 weeks to finish out your capstone. So let me know. We can definitely talk about like potentially 1-week extensions. So graduation, when is your official graduation date? That might be relevant for like career coaching, and I don't know if you want to like have a graduation date somewhere on like your resume or something like that. Your official graduation date is the day that you pass your review or the date you submit your last blog. This is just important to know. I think most relevant for career coaching, you have until like I think 60 days after your graduation date to declare your job start date. So you would count 60 days from the date that you officially graduate. And I am the one that will mark you as graduated in the back end and kick off that 60 days. So if you want to talk about that, we can also talk about that. If you want to like wait like a couple days here and there for some reason, I'm happy to make those adjustments as well. After you graduate, your certificate will be emailed to you to the Flatiron email address that is associated with your Flatiron account. And then, not early March, but early May. Early May, you'll get an email with instructions on how to download all the Canvas content. So I know when you all started, we were still on Learn. And there's this promise of like, you will have access to Learn forever. And so because that is being sunset, you have the option to download all of Canvas content. And it's pretty much identical, just some of the language, instead of the word learn, it says Canvas, but the content itself is identical. And you will be sent instructions on how to download like every reading, every lab. So if you didn't clone something in the past, there's a way to download that.
So the GitHub repos will be the same, or it's like it's instead of learn, it's switched to.
Yes, that's right. The repo links, some of them are a little bit different, just because some of them have like, I don't know, instead of like just updating the old repo, they just created a new one. If there are a lot of like language to change, it's mostly just like the mod 1, like how to set up everything. Those are the ones that have the most changes, which you probably don't need that information. I'm gonna find out what this grad date is. But yeah, any other questions about like getting material?
For the labs, I got in the habit of forking and cloning them all.
Mhm.
But is that going to be the same with the lessons? We're going to fork and clone them, or is it something else? Just download them?
It's not going to be fork and clone. It's going to be a download.
Okay.
Which I think for some of your GitHubs might be cleaner. I don't know. Oh yeah.
And also, what's the thing with the 60 days after graduation? What's the significance of that?
It's for career coaching. So you get to declare a job search start date. And it has to be within, I believe it's 60 days. I don't remember the exact number. It might be 30 or 60 or 90. It's one of those. After your graduation, you have within a 60-day period is when you declare your job search start date, which is when you start working on the career coaching deliverables. So if you wanted to take like a month-long break between graduation and starting, those job search deliverables, you can do that.
Okay.
I think it's also about the career coaches have the 60 days for getting your resume corrected and whatever is the process.
That's right.
Because that's what Victoria told me, that like once you from the graduation date within 60 days, all the meetings with them is going to be within that 60 days. Beyond that, I don't think so they are covering
Oh,
anything.
okay. I am not as familiar with the career coaching side, unfortunately, but that sounds like something that they would do.
Yeah.
Cool. So yeah, I think it's around the week that I mark you as graduated, you will receive that email on how to download everything. So the graduation ceremony, as long as you graduate in the month of May, which most of you will, the graduation ceremony is sometime in June. The ceremony is more of like what's the word? It's a ceremony. It doesn't, if you go to it or not, it doesn't make a difference. It's really just like a commemorative. It's on Zoom. It's just like a celebration of, your journey through the program. You get your names read off in on a Zoom meeting. That's it. So you'll get this invite early June, I think. And the actual date, I'll add it here and I'll add it to the calendar and I'll Slack you all once I find out the exact date. And also part of this invite, you'll be receiving a form, either part of this invite or in another invite, you'll be getting a form where you can submit your mailing address and you get Flatiron swag. So I think you get like a Flatiron hoodie. So any questions regarding like graduation, I guess, logistics?
So they will send the cap first and then like on the graduation day wear and we enjoy.
There's no cap, unfortunately. We have no graduation caps. There's no graduation garb. It's just you just appear at your graduation ceremony and then you get sent your hoodie, I think within the month of the ceremony. So probably you'll get it sometime in like June, hopefully. Anything else? Okay. So this weekend, next week, we'll be doing some capstone reviews. We'll be doing our capstone reviews. I'm going to be conducting it slightly differently versus how we've been doing our project reviews so far. Content-wise, it'll be the same, but this time I'm going to structure it more as questions. So instead of me doing like, okay, let's walk through all your notebooks and you just, run me through your code, I will be structuring the review in like sections. So just so you know, basically this is like a good thing to prepare. Basically, imagine that I don't know what your project is. I feel like over this past couple of months, we've been working very closely with your project. So I know your project inside out, but assume that I know nothing about your project because this will be the same form that if you were to do an in-depth technical interview, which is, I'll talk about interviews in a little bit. If you were to do an in-depth technical interview where they talk about your project, they might ask you those questions. So it's good to just be aware. If there are some questions that you are unable to answer, it will not affect your capstone passing. So I just want you all to be aware, like, for example, if you're using like a random forest model, I might ask, okay, can you tell me a little bit about how a random forest model works? I'm only going to ask you that because you want to prepare that for future interviews. If you can't answer it at the time, not a big deal, but it's just for you to know that, these questions can be asked. So yeah, if anything, do prepare explaining your project to someone that doesn't know what your project is. So what is your project? What are your motivations for doing your project if necessary? And what are like your overall data science processes? So some of you, have like a stronger data collection component. So maybe you like will describe like the overall arc of your project differently from, someone that has a heavier modeling component. So just prepare like how you would explain an overview of your project. Again, if you don't have a really well hashed out explanation, it will not affect your capstone. I just think it's a good time for me to give you pointers on how you can describe your own project. Okay, so additional one-on-ones. So I would say until the end of May. So for most of my students, I actually do additional one-on-ones for a little bit. So until the end of May, feel free to keep booking one-on-ones. Of course, I know mid-May I start another cohort. So if you want to like Slack me and like ask if I have time for a one-on-one, do that. I would say most students make use of these like extra 1 or 2 one-on-ones for technical interviews. So I'm more than happy to do like a mock technical interview for you. I know that students, career services gives you one as well, but the career services one is pretty hard. So if you want like a practice of the practice technical interview, I'm more than happy to do that for you so you know what to expect. And yeah, you can just book it off my one-on-one link as well. For any recurring one-on-ones, I'm actually going to take away the recurring link after you pass your capstone review. Finally, for Slack access, you actually will lose access to this Slack workspace that we use. I think it's not right after you graduate, but it's like, I think a couple months after you graduate. Right when you graduate though, you will be sent a link to join a new Flatiron workspace, and it's called the Flatiron Alumni Workspace. There's a different Slack workspace with its own channels. You can create, I'm going to create a class channel for you all so that you all can still be in the same class channel there. But that channel, that workspace has all of Flatiron's alumni. So it's a lot more job speak, a lot more, I don't know, I guess more advanced discussion rather than like, hi, I'm new to Flatiron School. So the stuff that's being discussed on that workspace is a lot more catered to, alumni and graduates. And so you'll get an invite to join that. I believe it will be in the same email that you get with the instruction on how to download the Canvas material.
Quick question. So there are like a lot of discussion which has happened based on the codes and in this channel. So if we want to have a backup of the discussions and keep it, will it be possible?
That's a good question. I think that you can, but it's going to be very, very messy. Slack data, I believe, is like a gigantic JSON. And also, I think I've never tried downloading anything from Slack. I know that you can. I think you can do it per channel. So maybe that would be a little easier. I'm not sure. I haven't done this myself. I know that someone in like one of my past classes have done it before, but I don't know what that data looks like. I would say anything important, like all the Google Docs that I've created, I will actually put them into a folder and then give you all lifelong access.
The reason is like there were some discussions which we had. I mean, all the students had their questions. So sometimes, let's say when we are working on some project or something, we know that, okay, like somebody had asked this question. We can just jump back to those question and then just immediately get answers.
Unfortunately, I don't think it's that easy to get that information. You can definitely like download an archive of Slack, but it would be very, very messy. So if you want to deal with that, you can. I would say like you do, like even my students who graduated like close to 2 months ago are still in the channel. So they do say that they're going to slowly roll people off of Slack, but it's usually like a good amount of lag time. I think also the assumption is that like at the end, your questions will be, I guess as you encounter questions, you can ask them in the alumni space where you have a lot more people who are like experienced to answer them versus, I guess it's just like a different crowd, I guess.
So this alumni channel will be like for how long? It's like for a year?
Oh, for the rest of time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
It's good to be in touch with a lot of people.
Absolutely. Like a lot of I've like connected students across different cohorts just in case like someone's looking for someone with like a specific kind of experience if you're in a specific city, and if I know 2 students across different cohorts that I think would be useful to like connect, I do that once in a while. So yeah, I mean a lot of like my friends and my past students are on that channel too.
Yeah, and it's very specific to let's say coding and thing.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
if I have connections in the LinkedIn, right, I don't know like who is doing what. Here I know that
exactly.
they are very specific.
Yeah,
So if I have to do like talk to somebody with regards to a particular job search or whatever, this will be much efficient than anywhere else. I think.
I agree. I agree. All right.
That's great.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of access of material, everything that isn't on Canvas, you'll have lifelong access to. So for example, my study group playlist, my study group repo, you will always have access to. Um, the what was the other thing I was going to say? Oh yeah, I'll send you all like a Google Drive folder with every document I've ever created for you all. Just so, and I'll like try and organize it as nicely as possible so it's easy to find. Yeah, my recordings you'll have, my repos you'll have, only Canvas you will lose access to, and they will tell you. I believe it's exactly 3 weeks from your graduation date you lose access to Canvas. So 3 or 2 weeks. I'll double check for you, but they'll tell you on that email. So you make sure you download all the stuff by then. And you have any
Quick
problem?
question.
Yes.
Quick question on that. Do you know how big of a download that is? Like, am I gonna need a
I'm
hard drive, or is that just, you know?
I'm honestly not. I actually never. I'm actually not sure. I don't know how big the like file. Or I've actually never even tried downloading the content myself, so I'm not sure. Unfortunately.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Anything else regarding like graduation, post grad questions about that?
I think for the right like the highest data that is being used is from the neural networks.
Mhm.
So the other, if you can split between the neural network and the other part of the course, it should be right pretty much less than the other ones. So,
I guess, yeah. From my understanding, you download them phase per phase or like mod per mod. I think.
so
I'm
the
not
fourth mod is the challenge, the most challenging one.
but I'm not 100% sure myself. Well, Henry, I think you had a question.
It's funny. Is alumni channel that includes like software and data science and everybody?
It does, but there are like discipline specific channels as well.
Okay. And do people like, pop up like firearm instructors? Like we always have like Ben Jacobson, I guess, pops up in our channel saying, hey, everybody, like do people come up to answer technical questions? Or is basically people relying on each other to answer technical
Oh,
questions?
good question. I don't know. So instructors definitely are in that channel and like do respond to questions. I'm just gonna do a quick check because I know Ben was not a former student. Yeah, so I don't think Ben is on that channel, but Matt Spar, who was a student, is in that channel.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I'm also there, and all the other like cohort lead instructors are on the channel.
Okay.
And always like feel free to just Slack me directly on that channel too. I'm always talking to like former students on there. Okay. Any final questions before we move on to talk about data science interviews? All right. I know that you all are in the headspace of finishing out your capstones, but we don't have any other time to talk about this, I think. So we'll talk about this now. And this document is already linked on your homeroom. Again, when I have that Google folder created, I will send this all to you. So you'll always have access to this as well. Before I start, I want to say like a disclaimer that I put together these bullet points really just based on my personal experience and the experience of my students and like experiences that my students have shared with me. So might not be all encompassing. I will also say that like a majority of my past students and my own experience is New York based. So I'm not sure how different or similar it is. But I think it's general enough that you would probably encounter similar structures. So I kind of was when I was putting this together, I thought about like the kinds of interviews, there are definitely like gray areas and some of them do overlap, but I do think there are like 4 main kinds of interviews. By 4 main kinds of interviews doesn't mean that like a company would give you round 1, 2, 3, 4 corresponding to this. I've had companies that have only like given me like contract work based on like 2 interviews. I know that some companies have like 4 or 5 rounds of interviews. Usually bigger companies have like much longer interview processes. So do take that into account. Usually when a company is interviewing you, they give you a couple sentences on like what to expect. So yeah, I think usually you can figure out which category this would like your interview would fall under, and then use these tips to like help prepare. To start, I call this like the first round interview, a screener, or an introductory interview. Usually not very, very technical. You're usually not going to code. Most of the time, this interview is done in like a phone call or like a Zoom call. Actually, more so phone calls in my experience. I like to think of this as a cultural interview. They want to know, like, based on how you speak, on how you present yourself, are you going to be a good cultural fit for the company? Usually the person who is calling you up will be like either a person from HR or a person who's like a hiring manager or a recruiter. So not usually technical. Sometimes they have like a list of questions that they're like, okay, ask the candidate this, and I guess like listen out for keywords, especially if the person talking to you isn't technical. So it could get a little bit conceptual technical, but you probably wouldn't be asked to code. I would say this is also a really good opportunity for you to get to know the company. I think, especially when you're entering a new field, I experienced this myself as well. When you're entering a new field, it's very easy to feel, I don't know, like the imposter syndrome of like, I need to make myself be a good fit for them. But I do think in the long run, it's important to make sure that the company is a good fit for you. And so I think use this as an opportunity to try and understand more about the company. Usually if it's a recruiter calling you or a hiring manager who's calling you, they understand the company. And so you can ask them questions like that. Of course, cultural questions. Maybe you ask like, actually one of the questions I really have found useful to ask, and like from there is really easy to branch off, is what are the kinds of problems that the company is looking to solve? So I'll maybe ask them like, oh, what, maybe if they have like a very broad product, maybe ask, hey, what is this team working on solving right now? Or what is the project this team that I'm interviewing for is working on currently? And from that, they usually give you some info, which actually leads to like, I think, very productive further conversation. If you're especially interested in the company, I think this is an interview that gives you the opportunity to align yourself with company culture as much as possible. I think that, you know, with a company and with a lot of companies now, unless they're like brand new, you can really Google and find out a lot about them. I don't subscribe to Glassdoor or anything, but I've always found that through like the first few ones that I see for free, I can sort of get a sense of, you know, the company culture, maybe through their like website or their social media. I get a sense of, you know, the kind of tone that the people who work there want to put across. And I think that is something that I do keep in mind as I'm speaking to them. All right, do I want to use more professional language? Are they like a little bit more chill? Can I use like, are they like younger? Do they lean more? Did they come from like more traditional industry backgrounds? So I found that like I have interviewed, like the way that I speak at like a finance company interview can be very different from the way I speak to like a tech startup interview. So I personally like to keep that in mind. The most common questions that I've received from these interviews are, tell me about yourself, which I think that if you don't first think and plan what you want to say, it's really easy to go all over the place with tell me about yourself. It's such a broad question. In terms of like focusing, I like to talk a little bit about my history. In terms of my history, I mean like the job that I'm working at just prior to an interview, or when I first graduated the boot camp, I really just talked about like my experience in the coding boot camp. I think especially if you came from a very different industry in the past that was not, you know, data analytics, talk about how you found data analytics. I know I actually asked you all this question when you all first started the program. I don't know if you all remember, but our first one-on-one, I made it a point to ask those questions. Like, how did you find Flatiron School and what was your journey to data science?
Do you get the recording?
From the first one-on-one? Oh my gosh. Wow. I was like, I don't even, it was such a different time back then. I wish I did. I wish I did. It would be so fun to see like the growth from first
Yeah.
one-on-one till now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I actually personally, whenever I'm interviewing, I actually have like a notes app with like a list of things that I want to make sure that I mention in these like tell me about yourself questions. And if like, if the company is like specific to like a specific industry, I might want to like add certain points here and there. Another question that I think is very common is like, tell me about one of your projects or something that you're working on. So I would say prepare like a couple stories that showcase your abilities. It can either be like technical or something that I found that I like to bring in is something that highlights yourself to be like a worthwhile team member. I know that we didn't get as much opportunity to work with other people in the cohort because part-time cohorts are just harder to do that. But if you ever like collaborated with someone else in the cohort, turn that into a story and talk about your experience in working with other people, because a lot of times in these interviews, they want to mostly find out if you're a team player or not. And being a team player and working in these like group situations is something that a lot of like traditional graduates don't have, right? If you're in an academic program, you don't have that much opportunity to work with other people. So you can really use this experience to set yourself apart.
Yeah, I think we need to all discuss on the credit card project.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
Like,
Like,
everybody can have the same story to tell.
yeah, exactly. I think that like I've actually have had not very often, but I have had past students who like after graduation started working on projects together, just to get their experience of working with another person. Because I think when you're in that very learning phase, it's very understandable that you want to just make sure that you yourself know what you're doing. But it's a completely different set of skills working with someone else and like developing teamwork mentality, developing like patience and also coordination. Honestly, that's another set of skills. So yeah, other than that, the kind of if at all technical, the kinds of questions that they will ask are going to be very conceptual, very broad. I sent this out to you like a while ago, but it's hyperlinked here anyways. But these are possible conceptual questions that you could get. A lot of them will be very focused on like the mod 2, 3, maybe 4 material. And these are just very common questions that come up. As you can see here, like a lot of stats questions. Whether you prepare for stats questions, I would say look at the job description to see if they want you to have experience in statistics. But for most like data science modeling jobs, they'll ask these kinds of questions. I'm not going to go through them right now because we've talked about all of this. Lastly, project questions. These are like actually the project questions that I'm going to be asking you for your capstone reviews. So if you just want to get like a preview of that, that is over here. I'm not going to go through this right now because we still have a good amount to get through. So, okay, so this would be like very typically most companies have this as their very first interview. Whether they pair this with something else depends, but there's usually a component that is very similar to this. Questions so far? Okay. So the next 3 interview types, this is where it gets like pretty interchangeable, and like the kind of interview that you would expect really does depend on company. So I've broken it down to 3 other kinds. And so I'm going to talk about the first one, which is going to be a coding/problem solving technical interview. And for most data scientists or data analyst positions, it would be in Python and SQL. To prepare for this, HackerRank or LeetCode, basically any of these websites that have like banks of questions where you can just work through and solve. There are 2 different kinds. I've had a couple that are a time test URL, So it's basically companies who send me a HackerRank URL, and HackerRank, I think, allows companies to put together like a little test or exam of like maybe like 3-4 questions. And on HackerRank, they will basically give you like an hour to complete all of those questions to the best of your ability. So I've actually gotten that a few times, and they actually draw from HackerRank's question bank. So I had actually seen some of those questions before, basically when I was just working through HackerRank. So honestly, that's why I personally have been pushing HackerRank to all of my students, just because if you've seen the question before, you solve it so much faster. So basically what those will look like, they'll just send you a HackerRank link. You just go on it. I think you give them your credentials and then you complete that interview. And then they usually come back to you with like, you pass or you did not pass.
You normally let you like Google answer, like, because what if you forget how to do a for loop,
Yes.
whatever.
You absolutely get to Google. Unless they use a specific platform that doesn't let you Google, then I'm not sure. But HackerRank, you can Google. You're allowed to Google. Unless I don't know if even HackerRank, maybe they have the ability to tell you no, but typically you do get to Google. I've never been in a situation where I'm not allowed to Google something. So either be that where it's like, you're not interacting with anybody, or you interact with somebody. So I've had this actually a little bit more often, where you do live coding or pair programming with someone else who already works at the company. Or I've also been in situations where they contract other people to conduct their technical interviews this way. So it's likely, in my experience, an engineer that already works for the company, either like a data scientist that already works there, or like if they want to just test your Python skills, it doesn't necessarily have to be a data scientist, but just someone that works with Python at the company. And what that's like is they just present you with like a couple questions to solve with Python. And remembering syntax in this case is not as important. You should and likely will be able to Google, because all of my interviews like this, I have been able to Google. Again, I don't know how common my experience is or how like general my experience is, but every time I've had this kind of interview, I'm allowed to Google. I ask them before I do so just in case, and they always say, yeah, of course. Just Google how to use because for example, I always forget the syntax for sorting like a list and like using like the lambda key to sort it. And that's always something that I look up. So remembering syntax is not as important, but it's more so to judge how you problem solve. I found that I've actually received feedback on like my technical interviews. Like they like the fact that I make comments, and I like, before I even begin coding the problem, I break down the problem into like smaller problems or sections to work on. That's just feedback that I've received. So maybe take that if you'd like. Oh yeah, I wrote that here too. Breaking up your problem into smaller problems. And then this is just something that's very, very specific, but I think is worthwhile to mention. A lot of not most, but like a good proportion of the questions that I've received require you to like save data or like store values somewhere to retrieve later. And a trick that I learned actually from software engineering friends is that whenever you need to store something, instead of appending it to a list, it is a lot more efficient to store it in a dictionary format with a key that you could use to look up. So that's just like a tip that I got. I mean, it doesn't apply to everything. I will say, like, after doing a lot of practice with HackerRank, I noticed that, if there's a scenario like that, HackerRank is great because it has like the forum, or like what's that called? Yeah, the discussion boards for almost every question. So you get to see how other people are solving the problem. And then usually if there's someone who has a very efficient piece of code, they're usually using a dictionary over a list. So that's something that I think just takes experience to get used to doing. Like for me, dictionaries didn't used to be like my least favorite data structure to work with because they are not ordered, I think was the main thing that I did not like. But yeah, that's like a piece of advice that I got from some software engineering students that actually made a lot of my code that I was writing more efficient, not just in these interview questions, but also in general. So questions about this? I really do recommend that you all take maybe like a couple questions a week at the least to just get used to problem solving with either Python or SQL. Again, like HackerRank, I think has a really, really good SQL progression. Basically because you don't have to do like the cursor.execute. All you do is just type in like the select statement, and they have a good series of questions that really builds up from like easy and it gets harder and harder. On HackerRank, they also categorize the difficulty of their questions, and I've never received anything that's harder than like a medium difficulty. Even like some of the medium difficulty ones like are pretty hard, and I've never like, yeah.
Yes, question for you. So I have done a little bit of HackerRank, and I know they have like these sections you can do, and once you complete them, you get these badges. Do they do something to employers when you complete those badges, or when you get those badges? And I don't know if you're able to, like even the link, like LinkedIn, for example, LinkedIn has certain little small courses or whatnot that you can do. So, you know, would you recommend those?
Yeah, let me actually show you all. So the badges, they don't really do anything. It just could look good on your LinkedIn. So I would say, I wouldn't make that the goal, but you can actually put that on your profile to show that you've done a lot of stuff. I mean, I think what is pretty neat, let me see if I can find it here. Oh, so they have certifications on HackerRank, this is actually pretty new. This is only something that they did in, I think, last year, and within the last 2 years. When I graduated, this was not a thing yet, but these, they actually give you a certificate. I haven't needed to job search in a while, so I haven't gone through a lot of these, but Python basic is not hard. So they actually give you like a certificate, and you can put that on your LinkedIn. And then these are more like exam styles. You can still Google, but yeah, you just don't have access to like boards and stuff like that, like the discussion boards. But this one, I think you can put nicely on your LinkedIn. The badges, if not, I feel like can sometimes clutter unless you like pick and choose which ones. The badges, I don't know how, I have never really talked to anyone to see whether that is like important or not. But I feel like badges versus certificate, because it's like kind of a, I don't know, it's a certificate. It looks like as better. I don't know. But I mean, doesn't hurt to collect those badges. Any other questions about these short form, like short question interviews? Okay. So the next kind is a take-home interview. And this I've actually, especially during the time of COVID, I've gotten these more often, or not I've gotten these more often. Students who have like who I've been talking to have been getting these more often. They will basically give you this take-home interview. They either will give you a due date, or they say like complete this within a certain amount of time. I've gotten it from like some companies that are like more chill about it, where they're like spend no more than 4 hours, but they don't check how long you spend on it. Or maybe they have a way and I'm just not aware. Or they give you like a due date, or like they send it to you at a certain time and expect you to email it back to them within a certain time. Take-home interviews are either in the form, or I would say, yeah, mostly in the form of like a case study. How much depth they expect really, really depends. So I've actually seen more recently, I know it says here doesn't have to be coded. Doesn't necessarily have to be coded. So I've seen ones that they have you basically work through like a phase, like a mod project. And it's really that process of like cleaning data, modeling, and like interpreting results. Of course, because it is, supposed to be done in a few hours or a couple of days versus, 2 weeks, usually doesn't have to be as in-depth, but they just want to see, can you code just like well enough? And can you use the tools that you have in your data science toolkit to help them solve a problem? So usually the business problem that they have you solve is going to be something that's very similar to what the company does, or something that's like parallel, or what's the word, like metaphor, whatever, you know what I mean? It's like the very, very similar process as what the role would be working on. And yeah, the idea is to just, I've seen it done in like, they'll actually like send you a Jupyter notebook with like a series of questions or instructions. And you do that. I've also seen it in like, they give you like a PDF or a Word document, and then they tell you like, okay, like create this project in a Jupyter notebook or in like something else. And then you just do that.
So, one quick question. So now I was about to ask you about this. Like now we have been practicing all through in Jupyter Notebook only. So, and then like if they just say that, okay, create in Colab and send it to us.
Yeah.
Or they say that like, okay, you don't, right? We want something on the VS Code. Just write all your codes and just send it across.
Yeah.
So since we are not used to write a different ID, right? If I'm not mistaken.
IDE.
Jupyter- So since we are not used to that, how easy or how difficult it is to switch between Jupyter Notebook and the other one?
That's a good question. I would say like Jupyter Notebook, Colab, they're the same. If you code something in Jupyter Notebook, copy and paste the Colab, that's fine. In terms of like text editors, like using VS Code or like Atom or anything like that, basically Python files is why I really emphasize functionalizing your code. If you have everything in functions, you can pretty much copy and paste your functions over. But if you just have like lines of non-functionalized code, they might not work. More likely than not, they won't work as well or at all in a Python file. If you have everything into functions, that's when you know that it will work in a Python file. I would say if you want to practice transitioning from working in a Jupyter notebook to a Python file, what's good is take all your functions that you already, of course, it's very normal process to test all of your functions and your code in a Jupyter notebook first, because that's just so much easier to test off of, right? You can just do cells. When you've done your function, copy and paste it onto a Python file, and then the brand new Jupyter notebook that has nothing imported in it, import the function from your Python file and see if it works. So that's one way to test it. I will say I personally have never gotten an interview where they ask me to do it in a Python file, just because they know that, I think they know that especially like bootcamp students mostly work out of Jupyter notebooks. Most data scientists work out of Jupyter notebooks as well. So I think that is, I've never heard from anyone that they have you do that, but if they do, it does take practice. I think actually a really good thing that you could do if you want to ramp up to that is turn all of your past projects into functions as much as possible.
Okay.
All right. So that really depends on what the company is doing. I will say at the end of that interview, typically you would set up like a call with them to discuss the stuff that you did. Even if it's not like, even if they tell you that you don't have to code, I've gotten ones that are like, oh, pseudo code something or create an action plan. For example, they give you the business problem. They're like, oh, tell me what your action plan would be to solve this problem. Then you would just like mention libraries, mention like possible models. You don't have to like interpret anything because you don't have models, but you can say, all right, if I know I'm running, if my plan is to run like a random forest model, say like potentially I can get feature importances to get more information on blah, blah, blah. So yeah. And then, yeah, at the end, you just have a session where you just explain how you went through their case study. I think something that's good to think about is this kind of interview also tests your understanding of relating your technical with non-technical. Depending on how much information they give you about the business case, really try and think about what are like the edge cases to account for. As an example, I had one of these interviews with a healthcare company once, and they basically had me do some like data cleaning with like a database of like, what is it, like doctors and clinics and stuff like that. And I think it was like a SQL database, and they're like, okay, and I hadn't really thought about this when I was doing the case study. They talked about, all right, what if you have like a doctor ID in this table that actually has no information in another table? How would you fill in those null values and stuff like that? I know that's a very, very specific example, and like, honestly, they should have, I don't know, you as a data scientist, you're not in charge of making sure that their data is consistent. But just like think about what could go wrong, I guess. Okay, the very last kind of interview, I would say this kind of interview is more likely as like a final round interview or one of the final round interviews, or if it's a smaller company, they'd probably like bring you straight to this round. So like with a lot of the contract work that I do is for much smaller companies of like a few people. And so this is kind of like the kind of interview that I've had a lot of experience with. It will be likely with the people that you will be working with. So one, you want to, on the one hand, make yourself likable and show that, you know, you can get along with people in the team. I think in this interview, they want to just get an understanding of how they can work best with you. Or yeah, they just want to see if you would be a good fit to work in a technical capacity. You usually will get to know whether your interviewer in this case is a technical person or not. And so in my experience, usually yes. I've been in situations where the team doesn't have a data scientist and they want to hire like a data scientist or bring on some contract data scientist. And so, yes, they are not technical in a data science sense, but they understand like code speak. So you can get a lot more technical. You can bring in more jargon when you talk about that. You get to find out a lot more about what the team is working on. You get to find out in a lot more detail. Maybe you can talk about like, okay, what are the specific, like, yeah, what are the specific technologies and libraries that you use? How have your results been so far? Stuff like that. You can get into a lot more detail. I would say it's very similar to like the very first interview, but you can get a lot more technical. I don't have too many pointers here because it has been very, very different across different companies. When I'm like meeting with the people that I end up working with or alongside or under, it's really up to them what they want to ask you. And just think about it. If you were to hire someone, what would your questions be in terms of like when you want to work with somebody? I think all of you would have like a different set of questions. I think you can sort of start to guess the kind of questions that they would ask, but it's hard to do so as well, like based on maybe company culture, based on like how big the team is, how small the team is. But yeah, this is like the most like ambiguous or not inconsistent, but it's the most like niche and specific kind of interview. And usually this is like the last interview because you are like getting into detail. They really want to see if you can work on the specific thing that they are working on. So I don't really have too much to say on this. Cool. Any questions like overall? All right, well, I mentioned earlier as well that I'm more than happy to do like mock technical interviews. Usually the mock technical interviews I do are a combination of asking conceptual questions as well as talking about your projects this way. So yeah, if you want to have a mock technical interview with me, always let me know before you want to do a technical interview because I like to pull up your old projects and like I might ask you to send me your resume so I could ask you questions based off of what you have there. So yeah. All right, we're almost right at time. Any overall questions?
Hey, I have one question. My dog's squeaking a toy. What are some of the titles that we're looking for when we start looking for jobs? Like the analyst, I mean, like what are some of the titles that like I should be scanning for?
Yeah, I mean, I'm more than happy to talk about this more specifically with you all at like your last like capstone reviews or your one-on-ones, but most commonly you'll be looking for data scientist, data analyst. Another pretty common one recently, business intelligence analyst, because those are people who, you know, do more of like the actionable insights job functions. those are the most common ones out of like Flatiron School graduates. I think it really depends on which part of the data science process you want to focus on. Because I know, in this program, we've gone through the full data science like spectrum from like data collection, data scraping, API calls, all the way into like, analysis, statistical analysis, modeling at different levels. So I think it's a good idea to really think about like which part of the data science process do you want to work on? Because very rarely, unless it's a small company, very rarely you do the entire process. You're either doing a lot of like the EDA dashboard work or the modeling work. I think those are the two main like very broad categories. So really think about which one you see yourself doing more, or which one you might want to like work towards. We can talk about it more, and I like, can definitely share based on like my students' experiences. But yeah, the most common job titles that Flatiron students apply for: data scientist, data analyst. And then if you care more about like business scenarios, then it would be business intelligence analyst. All right, anything else?
So that this so like people like us, like who have right experience in all different fields, this looks like a right, okay, cool name. Like, okay, what are you doing? I'm a business intelligence analyst.
Yeah, it's a pretty sweet name. I have a couple of like my like boot camp classmates and a couple of my students that have that job title. It just sounds fancy. It sounds like you're a spy, I think. But yeah, well, this is our last official study group, which is crazy. I just want to say that like it's been really, really fulfilling seeing all of your growth through this past like 10 plus months. And yeah, I know we're going to see each other. This is not the last time we're going to see each other, but just want to say that I'm very proud of you all.
Hey, thank you. We definitely are right proud of you because I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I know that I would have dropped out right if it was not your class. So that's one thing. Yeah. One thing I want to always like, I love the, all the presentation time, because that's the only time when I could see everybody.
Yeah, I know it's usually hard for a part-time cohort, but I'm glad that a lot of like a good proportion of us can make that the usual study group time. So I do think it's very worthwhile and like important for you all to see how other students are working. So we have one more of those coming up on Monday. So
Yeah.
All right. Well, I actually have to go to the next one-on-one.
Okay.
But we will see each other again on Monday doing our capstone presentations. I think we will have at least like 6-7 people. So that would be good.
Okay. As usual, my name is Vilas.
Got it. All right. Well, I will talk to you all soon. Let me know if anyone has any questions regarding like the graduation or like as you're wrapping up any of those processes. All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Ish.
Bye, guys.
All right,
guys.
guys. All right, guys.